a stone cipher all the way from Berlin. No, she's from Seattle. First up is Seidenberg. He's a San Francisco-based writer and artist, and he's the author of Itch, Null Set, and Songs of Surrender. He co-edits the poetry journal Platch. You can buy a copy of it right here for 200 crowns. And he is the curator of poetry events and publications for The Lab, a nonprofit arts and performance organization in the Mission District of San Francisco. So please welcome Seidenberg.
Thanks. I'll divide the reading first by reading from this prose work of mine, Itch, which I also have copies of for sale, if you like. And then I'll read some line break verse, as it were.
I couldn't make it.
So this is a work of lyric philosophical prose, and it's all in medias res in a way, and so I'm starting in the middle, approximately. Why not? Take your time. Why rush to the gallows when you know that they'll be burning down the jail? If my position seems obscure, then you're right there, right where you need be to accept it when it comes around again. If I'm to tell you anything, and clearly I think I have, then it comes at the expense of my own specificity, producing little more than some crude picture of the world it seems we share. It's an odd device, I'll grant you. In making these attempts to vault the quizzical inertia of my suppliance to action, to having something happen in consequence of what amounts to chasing my own tail, I've given too much credit to the gifts of my admirers, whoever they may represent, if not someday reveal, resulting in a largely inconspicuous return to prior minimum. Should the wary supplication that's compelled you to this juncture have begun to feel like servitude, then consider yourself released. You may come away from our acquaintanceship with little else. If it proves true, if it proves out, I'll count myself among the few endowed to offer such exemption, to perform it, if you will, with neither warrant nor rebuke, an actor who finds wherewithal to end the play before the curtains rise. An actor who seeks purchase not in cream and ostentation, but in tearing down the theater from the wings. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
But I'm not there yet, or you're not. We're not there together, it should be obvious by now. But just who sets the stage and who plays player. One cannot merely ask for understanding and expect to be transformed. Perhaps such pained petition has resulted from some Vedic transformation having happened, that one should come to understand there's something not yet understood, and understanding thus should soon redress the cleft by closing it, accepting that a failure to do just so would make permanent an injury that same origin alleges to have healed. I think it's fair to think I've been of service, if only to myself, that I've shed a little light on the affliction that provoked me, a scene I can't imagine any other voice sustaining with such ease of will. I couldn't have made do with the inertia I was promised. I was seeded by the ongoing disaster of my time, in that sense of undoing, of my doing against undoing, as a matter not of choice, but of redundancy. That's not it. But of necessity, has been long since foreshadowed by this most general sketch of mine. Perhaps I have been lucky in achieving my vocation by coercion, for having then and there, in parsing out the stratagems within which I was stranded at the start of this, my seeming stand, been forced to the retreat. Perhaps, given the chance, I would have lived as you have, in the affable confusion of thinking my thoughts through. Judge for yourself. Or rather, I'm still struggling to inculcate a judgment that is not yours, that is not what you have chosen, to formulate the same dissatisfaction that I've come to live myself. I want to hear oblige you to make out the world as I do, a vision of the absence into which I've been repulsed, to give you ample reason to pursue the ends that I have, and by the same arousal of your formerly unknown finesse, make that sloth appear not only justice, but requite. Why else would one bother with such abject reportage, such claim to claim and story to a claim that's never made? Why else but in service to some postured pedagogy make a journey and adventure of such floundering accord? No standard of amusement is worth framing as a purpose. I have openly refused all bids to win you by such vim. I have even foregone efforts to portray myself as admirable or convince you that I have your interest at heart. It is for others to make light of your monotony, your boredom, of your aching to find place and so a placement, others to distract you from what bothers you the most. What I assume supports your manifestly apt frustrations for having found myself inscribed by just such an abuse, our least common denominator, if I've got it right. The truth of our predicament is our least common denominator, by which I hope to calculate the union of our contrary, what may have at one time appeared our differences in kind, our least pursuit. And even these attempts to win your favor, the convivial release from lack, from bathos and distrust, aren't able to distract us, to make light of the revenant that queers our sense of being whole, the wholeness of our senses, of our being sense. Any sort of appetence one's chances as dispositive, even that it should take on the savor of a need, is only rightly understood as requisite, as dictum, by reference to some previous awareness of awareness as a bracket around absence, an absence which said want presumes discovered, if not precisely mapped out from the start of the next. That you've made it here at all is ample proof. I will not claim it demonstrates your benevolence or your penury, but in each instance you are, by definition, who I want. It's possible that you find my demeanor entertaining. I can at least imagine such repose on second thought. But this too bears witness to your difference from the many feckless ruminants I have lost over this sojourn, or those who till their dying day would not commit to start, or just plain do so. There have been false commitments. My hope is to convince you our adventure is in common, that we've embarked together on a path whose end is clear, and to do so, I might add, by first delivering the monody of vows and incantations that will constitute its reach across the great divide. If the interest I've exacted still appears to you excessive, now that you've faced the peril of avoiding its increase, well, I here commend you. You have more than made your point. I'm not saying you're right, mind you, but that it would be wrong for you to have conjectured otherwise, even as I know that no such abstract motivation will ever serve to designate my index of contrary intents. I think you'll find that this is my peremptory distinction, if indeed you're looking for my difference from the pack, that my sense of vocation or of vision is not purposed by attempts to lead you slantwise when in the end I want you to go straight. Were I such a one, then this surrender to your vanity could be reasonably understood another cunning feint. Were I such a one, but no. Why continue on with such a dithering conceit? One cannot trust the liar when she claims to tell the truth, but what to think when she admits she's lying? All present discussion aside, I'm still telling a tale whose resolution is the telling, not the telling of the telling, or not exclusively so, not in large part, which is where this telling seems to point. You may be consoled by such a lavish dereliction, in knowing that your presence is the culmination of my activities elsewhere, the activities that led me to here, to this fulcrum of a trope. If not, fine. If so, then aren't you a dear, so humble in the claim made for your own life that you're willing to accept the exigence of your role in the lives of others, in the life, that is, of this other, as some small part of what you've come to think of as your purpose, your condition, the goal towards which your acclamation to my purpose points. I'm trying to describe the state that left me so disconsolate in my inconscient wallow of insipid consolations, so that I may console you in your indolent withdrawal, your visionary stagger into view. A promise, if it's not yet clear, that amounts to payment in kind. Or a recompense, I'd rather think, for giving myself over to my wanderings by wandering into. How wondrous we are, you on your mat, me in my station, how like siblings in our bickering and our love. Oh, you know quite well that we have suffered the same torments, that our parentage has hardly been a paragon of tenderness, even as our memories of fault fade to a wisp. So many spend their lives seeking accomplice, looking for fellowship, and here I have but stumbled into this disjunctive set. I hope one day you'll do me the same favor, making me your most trusted of admirers, the audience for an outreach doomed to fail without my willingness to accept. I hope you'll have that chance, but don't worry yourself just yet. For now, you've taken my hand, or I have taken yours, and I won't ask reciprocal debasement unless we're forced to part. So this is a work of poetry of mine called Null, which I also have here, if you're interested, which is divided into these, it's an odd accordion fold book, and I'm going to read one of the sections, or much of it, and what my time is like. What time did we
13
start?
minutes.
What's that?
You've been going for 13 minutes.
13 minutes, okay. I've got 7 minutes more.
You're good. You're good.
I'm good? All right. So this is called, this is a section called Another Call, one of the 3 sections. First poem is called Indelible. Who speaks that I should hear the cry beside me from an absent mouth? What tongue will twist its silent sign into the charnel bastion of this turgid store, this sanguine moat? And this, although all this, and though the surfeit overtakes me as a stranger's fist, negotiant turned pillager for being proved indelible, coerced to faith. Guerdon. The mound of ash you culled for me, a carapace, the cusp of sense, undrawn from any bric-a-brac of manufactured satiety, and curdled into pump and pulp, the dissidence of muscled grist. What wisdom that by garnering the excess you have sanctified duration as sufficient as the guerdon of the given, or a promise kept. Another call. I know what I know by the motion of tides, but everything else is redaction. Rid of you, I thought the disaster would carry the rest of the cull and the crew past the summit. but they fell away. I've forgotten their names and need divvy my fortunes with no one. They dried up and scattered, rebuking the flood to surrender their tides to the ocean. This next poem is in 3 short parts. It's called Dre, and it's for a poet, I don't know if you, who died last year, named Anselm Hollow, great American poet. 1. Devour the reins as you gallop, but don't throw the rider off. You used to say we lived in a polis of shadows, shared all but the slope of occlusion as we gambled towards the finish, tramped the unconsuming glower of the fire at its source. But now your night is night, and I appear discreetly absent, a syndicate of vapors, as a dust cloud under hoof. Your night is night, our day is done, the reins hang limp, now bolt. 2. You asked for the border, I gave you the plains. You asked for the bullet, I gave you the scythe. At dawn we will go our separate ways, but someday we will ride again, alone again, together, bewitched by stagnation, the thirst of the stone. 3. Let petition suffice. Let the toil of silence reveal you. Alone as a flash of the sky in the night is both stranded in time and mimesis. Let the pace of the trot make the circuit you travel seem singular. Hear the hum of the pit, let it stopper your ears as the thrill of the plunge overtakes you. Let the corpse of the rider, slumped low in the saddle, give weight to each step without meaning. Interior hypothesis. In the habit of distinguishing the infinite as swollen, one fails to differentiate an infinite swelling, the vector of the always finite, always gaining ground. So many steps will end in ash, will sink into the aching dust of manumitted causeway that conflagrations rip through without trace of cark or toll. This is how one builds a kingdom. This is how one's kingdom holds, by setting sights upon the endless verdure at the border and turning back, returning to the servitude of walls. A voice. Allow the wheat its portion of tares, and one will find one's provender in a mouthful of thorns. Allow the void its threshold, and the world begins. To be this end, to undertake this bearing of compelled repose, allow the flame its fuel, and watch it die. Stampede. This dectic incantation is the ownmost of my stumbled road, a clearing out by push and pull of vague, depleted missives. No struggle then to find a share, despite the absence of the whole and all the windows stolen from the room in its concrescence. Forgive me then for taking on this title part, this leading role, for giving in to what may seem the iterative surfeit of any pedagogy that presents its ingenue as guide, by keeping just ahead of the stampede as it advances. Account. Restore Restore the seed to sleep in the clay. Let the harvesters pass. Let the gleaners weep with the moistureless tears of privation. So shall they succor the diffident breach, mouth the words to entreat, a return to the silence of silence. So shall they cherish the dead as replete, when everything else is but longing. Warrant. The want of shepherd makes us grieve the struggle of transhuman cinders, makes us pity who remains without a path from which to veer. No forgiveness or acquittal for corruption unengendered. We grieve the flame, we grieve the cinders, rejoice in shepherding our dead. What warrants the similitude of absence? This is the final poem in this series. It's called Another Voice. Ours is the stillness of roots, not mountains, swaddled in the numbing marl. We may present a sudden turn, an archetype unfathomed, but the cipher of mimesis is not chosen or ascribed. Return us then to absence then, and this our one resolve. Thank you.
All right, and our next reader is Donna Stone Cipher.